Alrighty, welcome to the presentation today. We're going to be going over Kim Ng. Read a New York Times article about her. She became the first female and second Asian heritage general manager of a Major League Baseball team. So here's an overview of the article. Essentially, she gets hired as a general manager for Miami Marlins. Goes over how she's an example for young women and girls, and how she's has 30 years plus experience in Major League Baseball, so she's very experienced. There's an outpour of support from the community. Again, just a feel-good story. The resilience, adversity she goes through to get to this position really covers that. And then I went over some other articles: TSN, ESPN, Washington Post, Fox News, MLB. So they all pretty much present the same idea. I mean, Washington Post does go over a little bit of the discrimination she had to go through, but again, mostly all about the feel-good story there. And here are some of her qualifications. So front office with White Sox, she started out for about 6 years. She won a championship with the Yankees, worked for Dodgers, was in a MLB operations position as well as an American League position, and plus 30 plus years. So quite qualified to be in a general manager position. We see some support from the community, reading up on her experience. Good for her. I hope it really works out. Great to see her break the gender barrier. This one resonated with me. Never heard of her till now, but did some research and well-deserved on the position. Congrats to her. Again, I didn't really hear about her. 20 years of watching baseball since I was 5 and never heard of her. But again, did some research and really impressed with what she's come up with throughout her 30 years. So here's the division within the community. So we're not interested in women being in men's sport. Affirmative action doesn't mean the most qualified candidate gets it. Again, whatever happened to the most qualified? Well, she has 30 plus years, been turned down mainly, never really given a look or second look at the position, even though she's had countless interviews. This one's really disgusting. I mean, anything is an improvement for the Marlins. Could have had a dog. Some comments, same thing. Like, these kind of comments are just, it shows the division within the community. Again, she'll also be the first GM to be fired that's a female of Asian descent. Already looking at her failures and rather than seeing any potential success she can have. How does this link to 2205? Body image and negotiating femininity. We've got the social determinants of health, specifically with working conditions, gender, race, social exclusion. We got media framing, so that one's going to be focusing on how media represents these issues in society and how they frame their stories to, like I said, present that feel-good story. So body image and negotiating femininity. So Bennett explains more about how female athletes have to be seen almost as two separate, a female and an athlete, because the female ideal body is not really what is needed or necessary for success in athletics as a female. And the media's portrayal of female athletes' bodies really reinforces that. So again, I went over Jackson and Darvis and Sangas and Trollin, and essentially most of these are to do with how the female body is presented in sports and sports media, and how they essentially have to, so like they're underrepresented, so they're more represented as a female than they are as a professional or as an athlete. Jackson more states is not to do necessarily with females, but more to do with how media influences our ideologies. And that one's more about hegemonic masculinity, but it applies just the same to femininity and sexism. And here we have Trollin is more about the Western culture and female ideal body and how it reinforces how women should be seen to society and should look in society. And this is just a Washington Post. In their article, they had this comment from the 1990s when she was coming up in the league. Just a executive, in a male executive in a high up position. Honey, can you get me some coffee? Now, just derogatory terms like that, even though she's an executive, she belongs there, right? And then here we have someone should tell her to try and snag a fly ball in those clothes. It's not going to be easy. So whereas often we see female athletes being discriminated or mocked for not dressing as feminine as they should in society, really. Well, here we see an executive in a female, or executive female in a management position in sports being mocked for dressing more feminine because she can't catch a fly ball in a pantsuit. Well, she's an executive. She's not playing the sport. She has played. She played college. She did really well. But that's besides the point. And again, just fresh sandwiches in the locker room, just sexist comments like this that are essentially reinforced through this ideology that is body image and negotiating femininity in sports. We're going to move on to social determinants of health, working conditions, race, gender, social exclusion. I did strictly stick to Mikkonen and Raphael's 2010 social determinants of health Canadian statistics. So I strictly avoided the statistical part and more did the underlying issues. So not being adequately rewarded. 30 years in baseball, and she's been turned down multiple times for position issues, almost overqualified in at this point. Gender gap, wage gap. We don't necessarily know her salary at this point, but the average salary is about 1.5 to 3 million for a general manager. We don't know if she's going to be paid less or more or the same. Hopefully it's around the same, but years of being rejected from that position can definitely add up. And then Washington Post post here about her racism that she's experienced. So there's institutionalized, personalized, and internalized. Institutionalized, just 100 years in baseball without general management, that's a female, that, or, I guess it's racism. So, I mean, she's also Asian. She's only the second Asian heritage general manager in over 100 years baseball as well. So you see sexism and institutionalized sexism and racism. Personally meditated, this one's more Washington Post, Bill Singer, New York Mets special assistant. While she was at a conference or a meeting with him, he mocked her heritage and questioned where she came from. So that's more personalized. And then internalized is just reinforced by these kinds of things here, right? Generations coming up in the same baseball community is going to have some internalized sexism and racism. And then social exclusion was not, it's a male-dominated sport and culture of baseball that's really reinforced through excluding people like women have no place in professional sports. Comments like this, but it's a reality when you look at, this comment didn't come from nowhere. That came from 100 years of not having a female in professional major league sports. Professional sports, they're in all kinds of professional sports, but Major League Baseball, no. This is a first. So media framing, Ritmanova is more about the immigrant story, but really stuck to the point about how media frames a news story to present it in one specific way that they want you to see it. That's really about the feel-good story, all the articles coming up with a feel-good story and not really touching on the underlying issues. So Trillin's women's success failure, her achievements are not always seen as her own. So here we have leave it to Derek Jeter to make this happen. That's kind of taking away from her personal achievement and associating her achievement with someone, a man or a male, as giving her that opportunity when she earned that opportunity. Again, Trillin preserves the power of men using words like professional and dominated, like I used in the last one. It's not necessarily a male-dominated sport. It's more that it's underrepresentation of females in that sport. Dominating professional, like associating professional with male just automatically without recognizing the countless professional female athletes and executives in the sporting world. These are used a fair amount in media to represent male, over-representation almost in sporting communities. All right, so we're gonna get to the questions to think about. Should these negative and destructive comments have been taken down? Do you think they should take them down, or does everyone have a free right to speech? I personally think, they're destructive and they reinforce those. However, you're torn between freedom and reinforcement, sexism and racism, right? Does the media ignore the dark side? Do you think they try and frame these stories to be feel-good stories and ignore the fact that there is systemic sexism and racism within these big professional organizations? How do you go beyond the individual achievement? So how do you acknowledge that this is a big step for females, but how do you also, how do you figure out how to fix it? how do you make it so the next level of females or the next level of Asian heritage or the next level of Black executives don't have to go through these adversities and these tribulations that she had to go through. Yes, she went through them. Yes, it's amazing where she is, but how do we get it to a point where people don't have to go through that? And again, do you think this has changed anything, Kim Ng being hired as a general manager? I personally don't. I think there needs to be more systemic changes to happen rather than just a female being hired. Now, if she does really good, there might see an influx, but if she does bad, we could see 100 years without another female general manager, or player for that matter. You never know. And that'll conclude the presentation for the day. These are the references, mainly articles, scientific or the newspaper articles I went through, and that'll be it. Thank you very much.